Yeah, I'll start off with my name. My official name is Owen, O-W-E-N, Pleasant, middle name, Pearson. And I was born in 1918. And and I lost my father when I was 2, so I never did know him. I lost my mother when I was 8. I had 2 sisters. I was the youngest. So my mother's parents, who we were living with, because she was a school teacher and we would live there during the summer months, and she died. She had an unusual disease that hit her while we were in Miami visiting and while she was in the ocean. And so she was paralyzed when we came back from Miami to my grandparents. And so then she lived 4 or 5 months, which gave me a chance to kind of get used to the fact that she was going to pass on, and I was 8 years old. So then my grandparents, I had 2 sisters and I was the youngest, and so my grandparents told her that she didn't have to worry, that they would raise us and get us educated. And so we were fortunate enough to have good grandparents that made a good enough living to get us to college with the help of my other relatives. And so I got an education and graduated at the University of Georgia. I had graduated in high school in 1935, so I graduated and stayed out 1 year during my 5 years there that between then and when I graduated. My uncle thought that if I stayed out 1 year during that time, that I'd make some money and help out on my education, which didn't work because I spent that money. I had a good time that year. But I graduated then in college, university, at 1940. And my first job was with General Electric Credit Corporation. That was a finance part of GE. And it was a good job. And I stayed with them for a year. And then I was drafted. About that time, Hitler had started his stuff. And so I was drafted into the service. And so when I was drafted in, well, then I saw that we were going to be into a war. And so I decided to go ahead rather than be a non-commissioned officer, which I did make corporal. So then I went on to officer school and decided I'd be an officer, which I did. I saw the difference between an enlisted man and an officer. So then I got commissioned in the U.S. Army as a 2nd lieutenant and in the Quartermaster Corps. And my first assignment was in General Hospital, U.S. Army General Hospital, which was the largest of the hospitals in the U.S. Army. And but incidentally, my first assignment was in Louisiana, and which was down in close to Alexandria, and got in there, and the hospital hadn't even been started. It was just they were just getting organized, and so I had a little time in there and waited until they got the hospital organized, and so then I was the only quartermaster officer in this general hospital, which was the biggest of the hospital. They had 50 officers in the hospital. They had 100 nurses in the hospital, and it was called a 1,000-bed hospital. Well, it was called a 500-bed hospital, and we eventually had as many as when we got started and got overseas. Well, we at one time had 1,200 patients in that hospital. Of course, at that time we didn't have enough beds, and we had guys sleeping, on the floor and everything else. And I was, I was a quartermaster officer, so I was assigned to this general hospital as transportation and supply. which meant I did have all the transportation, the ambulances, the jeeps, and that sort of thing to operate. And we had a lot of enlisted men to help operate this hospital. In fact, we had 500 enlisted men to work in this hospital. We set up in Europe. We went to Europe and started off in England. In England, we set up one hospital in England and operated it for about 9 months, and then they would ship in a new group and we would move up. And so then we went to France and we set up 2 hospitals in France, which meant we set up 3 different hospitals. We operated each one of them about 9 months, and then they would send a new outfit in. And so anyway, that's where I spent my U.S. Army time overseas. The thing of interest might be of interest to you is that I wanted a dog. I wanted a German Shepherd, and the Germans had already gotten all the dogs, so I couldn't get a German Shepherd. But while I was in France, well, the people heard about me trying to get a dog, so a Frenchman showed up and he said he had Irish setter that had just had puppies. So ended up, I ended up with this beautiful dog. It was a little Irish setter, and I kept the dog and kept him with me. And as I say, I had was an officer in my outfit, so I could get by with things like that. And so the dog grew up to be a pretty good sized dog. And when we came home, well, to make the story a little bit better, we went to Marseille, France to come back home after the war was over. And something happened to our ship, so we stayed down there for a long time. We stayed down there for a couple of months, and that gave me a chance. My dog had grown up to be a pretty good sized dog, and that gave me a chance to train this dog to stay quiet. I was in head of everything that had to be shipped back in the hold of the ship. So I had got me a footlocker and built it up off of the floor and put holes in it, and I got the enlisted men to start training that dog not to make any noise, so that when we started to load the ship up, I was in charge of all of that. So I had all for my outfit. So I had that dog in one of those footlockers. I had holes in the bottom where he could breathe, and we had got him trained the way he wouldn't make any noise. And I had markings on the footlocker as though it was a footlocker full of materials that had to be shipped back and was in the hold of the ship. So when it came to loading the dog, my box on with the dog in, I had told him to take him to my quarters where I was going to be. And so they took the dog in there, and then of course when the ship went out from harbor, well then we got the dog out, and a lot of guys had slipped little small dogs that they could put in under their jackets. Well, I had the only big dog, and so as we got out from harbor, well, this was a brand new ship, and the captain came on and said, anybody that had dogs, bring them up to the top deck, because he had a place for them, and he didn't want those dogs to mess up anything down where we were sleeping. So I took my dog. I had the only big dog, as he was already grown then, and I brought that dog back. And in fact is, I brought him back all the way to Louisiana. And even when I came to Louisiana, I kept that dog for a good long time. It was until he disappeared one time after we got to Houma. And that's about the story of my life, except that I had, when I was stationed in Louisiana, I met my future wife there, Elaine, and so we agreed that we'd get married after I got back from service after that, because I wanted to be sure I got back in one piece. So we got married when we came back, and then I went to work for General Electric Credit, which and they assigned me to Birmingham, Alabama. So we lived in Birmingham, Alabama for 2 years. I set up dealers for appliances. That's what General Electric at the time, they were wanting dealers set up that would sell refrigerators and stoves and anything that was electrical. And so we lived in Birmingham for a couple of years, and I traveled the state. Well, I had an office, and I set up an office in Birmingham. And so when Elaine got pregnant, well, her parents, she was only a child, lived in Shreveport, and so her parents said that we just couldn't stay out in Birmingham, so they immediately went to work to get us back to Shreveport. So her father was in the finance business and car business, and so he had to go to work to paint a picture for me to get me to give up my job, which by that time had a pretty good job, because I had made a year before I went overseas, and then the rest of that time was to my credit. So I had 5 years credit with the Army. I mean, with the job, and so I had a pretty good job when I came back, because they had to guarantee my job. So anyway, so he had to paint a pretty good picture for me to for us to move to Shreveport, and he promised me the moon, which like getting me in business and helping me with the car business, which we did. We moved back to Shreveport, and Elaine had twins, and so we applied immediately for a Ford dealership. We all were Ford people, and so we got in the car business over there and got in the used car business, and then they had this opening that came up in Houma, which was only 50 miles from where her parents lived in Shreveport. So that seemed like a perfect deal for us, and we came to Houma, and that's why. And then she had her twins, and we came over here with 2 babies, and so that's where our career started.